Hello pro strikers. Today we're diving into the fastest way to elevate your striking skills. By the end of this video, you'll understand the single most impactful element to focus your training on: positioning.
The position to put your body in to avoid punches, to smother punches, and to also react to punches.
When you start learning any combat sport, the initial focus is almost always technique. On day one boxing, you're shown how to stand correctly before quickly moving on to throwing punches. You'll learn how to jab, cross, and throw a lead hook, all whilst maintaining a proper stance. You'll get instructions on hand positioning, footwork, and maybe some basic defensive moves like blocking or parrying. The day one Muay Thai class follows a similar pattern, possibly adding in a roundhouse kick or a front kick. Kickboxing, karate, taekwondo, they have the same fundamental formula: stance, striking mechanics, and defense. This is a tried and true method of learning martial arts. It has been used for centuries, but at a certain point yields diminishing returns. Once you can throw a punch or kick with force and accuracy, will repeating it endlessly provide the best results? Bruce Lee once famously said, "I fear not the man who has practiced 10,000 kicks once, but I fear the man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times. While that's wise advice, technique alone won't be the game changer once you reach a certain level of proficiency. The number one thing that's going to maximise your results is positioning. Rather than just learning how to throw an attack, learn where to be to land it, whilst minimising your opponent's offensive opportunities."
Overlooked. We're too focused on attacking and trying to hurt our opponents that a lot of times we don't take that bird's eye view and understand where we are in the ring. Now, those who know me and my career know that I used ring control very well. And one of my prime examples is my fight against Raymond Daniels, a fighter who's very dynamic, who likes to move and circle well. You can't just fight that person in the center of the ring. They're gonna be able to hit you, blitz in and out and move, and then you're just gonna be chasing them the entire fight. So we gotta learn to be able to move our opponents to where we want them. That's where the advanced pressure fighter comes in.
Let's talk about geography of the cage. Where the battle takes place can significantly alter the outcome. Where you are relevant to both your opponent and the cage matters in every exchange. The centre of the cage is neutral ground. Let's assume all else is equal: height, reach, weight, and skill level. In this case, neither fighter has an advantage, making it a 50-50 situation. It becomes a bit of a coin toss. If we can push the opponent back towards the cage wall, then we are giving ourselves a positional advantage, as they will have less options available to them. However, pushing your opponent back towards the cage wall is going to be better. It gives you a distinct positional advantage as it limits their movement options. If you're directly in front of someone in centre cage, they can escape to their left, to their right, they can step in, or they can retreat backwards. But if they've got the cage wall behind them, they have one less option. If you then cut them off further on one side, they're left with even less choices. This is limiting their escaping options and increasing your control. So this guy is hot on the lips of everyone in combat sports at the minute, Toria. I've done a breakdown on him on the YouTube channel. You should definitely check that out if you haven't already. So Toria is the king of the mid-range. He'll bridge the gap hard with the jab and he always commits on his shot. However, this fight with Jai Herbert showed how entering in on 50-50 exchanges can be so dangerous. It is not a good idea to enter an exchange without first disorganising your opponent's defence with a feint, some sort of low-risk straight-line attack like a jab or front kick, or create a new angle of attack by turning your opponent first. And this has been talked about in other videos, how to turn a man with positional awareness, and this comes into ring cutting as well. In a 50-50 exchange, one person's always going to come off worse, and in this instance, Toria ate a full shin to his face. In the second round, Toria did a much better job of cutting off the cage and disorganising Jai as he pressured him to the cage wall. It's a brilliant sequence, and you'll get to understand how the phases work, like how Toria knows when the good time to go is, and that's when he's at a positional advantage with Jai Herbert's back to the cage wall. Whether this was conscious or subconscious thought is part of his natural style to pressure someone forwards, but he's definitely developed his style and evolved it to be more defensively sound when implementing this approach. Cutting off an opponent closes the door on one side, it limits their options, and this is how good ring cutting works. Toria creeps in and he takes inches from the cage, he keeps himself in stance and ready to fire, so as Jai Herbert steps in, Toria can crash the party with an intercepting punch. Jai wants to use his jab, which is actually a good decision. It's a good shot to go for, but Toria's there, set and ready to intercept him with a right hand. He also catches Jai with a left hook. As he's cutting him off, to Jai's right. So as Toporia's moving in, Toporia's stepping in with his left foot first. He's keeping Jai just on the outside of his lead foot. So when Jai steps into jab, Toria can immediately catch him with that left hook counter. He's shepherding Jai towards that left side, whilst keeping his right side engaged and ready to go. Obviously, Jai's circling away from Toporia's power side. He's trying to avoid his right hand. But Toporia's got that ready, and that's shepherding. That's what's making him move in the direction that kind of Toria wants him to. So eventually he's creeping off at that 45-degree angle to slowly but surely trap off Jai Herbert from circling and force him into the power side. He's shepherding him, he's controlling him, he's corralling him into the power side punch that he wants to land. So Jai eventually, back to the cage wall, he's got limited options. So in the first instance, he has more options to exit. He can go backwards, he can go left, right, and he can come in and go forwards. In the last sequence for the big exchange where Jai Herbert should have chosen a different option, he should have either exited hard to his left, just high guarded, wore a shot on the gloves and just got out of there, or crashed in for a clinch and smothered. He chose to exchange. That was like the third and the most deadly option that he had, but he had no option to go backwards and he could no longer move to his right because he was going to go directly into a Toria left hook. So obviously he chose the option to exchange. Toria was there, he was ready. He was also ready to throw punches in bunches. He was prepared to throw a combination, and it just shows the repercussions of playing the lottery.
Only suckers get hit with right hand. If you're not in position to punch and make a punch miss, it's not a good place to be in this ring. So when my lead foot is between Francesca's legs and her lead foot is between mine, we're on line. What I call on line is where you can be hit. What takes us offline is head movement and a little bobbing and weaving, okay? But when we're in this position, she's right on line for me to her, but on the other hand, I'm right in line for her to strike me. So this position here is where you want to be.
Positional awareness relative to your opponent is also very important. We are talking about if we are stood directly in front of them, slightly to the left or right, or a style clash with an Orthodox versus Southpaw matchup. In an Orthodox versus Orthodox matchup, both fighters need to step their left foot into the centre of their opponent's stance to land their combinations effectively.
Because the whole camp, they're probably just working on how to hit us with a right hand. And then when we take that away, what you're going to do, that's what you saw, they're panicked.
Moving deliberately, like shifting to the right, can take some of your opponent's attacks out of play. Now all of this can fall under the category of footwork, and it is footwork. But I feel when we talk about good footwork, it is often overcomplicated and people tend to think about the fancy stuff. Fighters like Lomachenko. Lomachenko is a man who slides and pivots around his opponent beautifully with fast and nimble feet. He's the perfect example of an agile fighter, and he definitely springs to mind when we think about elite footwork. However, the things he can do simply aren't possible or feasible for the majority of fighters, particularly at the heavier weights. It isn't needed. Good footwork and positioning can be much more subtle and a lot simpler to execute. A slight step to the left or right might be all it takes to throw your opponent off their game and give you a positional advantage for attack or defence. Having an attack and exit strategy is a must for any good striker. Always consider where you are before initiating an attack and where you want to exit to after. When moving toward an opponent's power side, be mindful of distance to avoid walking into a punch. Stepping just outside their range and using distractions to disguise your footwork is going to be the effective tactic to use. I've covered this in other videos on the Pro Striking Patreon, so feel free to check it out if this is something you're interested in. Regardless of the situation, maintaining a safe distance is crucial. Positioning is the single most important tactic in a fight, and good tactics separate great fighters from the good ones. If you're older, slower, shorter, or less powerful than your opponent, positioning helps neutralise their advantages. You may not have the best jab or kick, but if you position yourself effectively, you'll find the openings to use your strengths. This is the beauty of fighting. The most athletic man doesn't always win. Of course, technique does matter. You don't want to throw punches or kicks that leave you off balance or open to counters. But once you're proficient in landing basic combinations and defending them, your main training focus should shift to understanding your position relative to your opponent and the ring or cage. When analysing a fighter, look beyond their favourite moves and pay attention to how, when and why they use certain techniques. Do they favour counter-punching with the right hand, or do they like to lead with it? Are they advancing to land it, or do they hang back, waiting for an opportunity to counter? At Pro Striking, we feature fighters known for exceptional positioning on the channel, with many breakdowns featuring Supelec, Giorgio Petrosian and Ilia Topuria. I highly recommend checking out these breakdowns to study their techniques more closely. There's definitely things that you can pick up and add into your own game. I love the quote, "Be wary of an old man in a profession where men usually die young." Clever fighters have longevity. Fighters who prioritise positioning often have better defence, leading to longer, healthier careers. Bernard Hopkins, for example, competed at an elite level until age 50, as he mastered how to neutralise opponents' strengths with skill rather than brute force. When it comes to training positioning, there are several things we can focus on. To develop the skill, you can focus on live drilling, pad work and sparring. James Toney, though not an ideal model for health, only sparred in his training camps. He literally just turned up to the gym and had fights. He'd had enough right hands thrown at him in the gym to know where not to be when someone was throwing one at him. I think you can achieve similar results in a safer way than playing the Russian roulette of hard sparring, through proper training where you hold yourself accountable for your position.
I used to always say, man, if you look at probably 80% of mitt work, it's all in place. Guy has a pretty target here, pretty target here, pretty target. And you hear pop, 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 pop. He said, and I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't like a lot of the drills we do because it takes me out of my comfort zone and it makes me work my whole body instead of just standing here banging away looking pretty. But when I get in the ring, it transfers over.
As always, thank you for watching. For additional breakdowns and insights, head over to the Pro Striking Patreon, where you'll find even more valuable content, particularly on this area of training. Pro Striking appreciates you more than watching a 40-something-year-old Bernard Hopkins piece up the young and dangerous Kelly Pavlik.
Practicality is where I work. You can do as much theory as you want. You need to go and do the practical stuff and perfect it.